Well, hello there, and welcome to another interview presented by me, Jack Lucas Caffrey. Now, about like a month or so ago, I was introduced to a video game called Super Animal Royale, which I loved so much that I decided to interview the person who wrote the soundtrack and did the sound effects. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Catbaux. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Very good. Very eventful day, but good interview to end it off with.
Amazing.
So I suppose the first thing I'm going to ask you is because a lot of people would probably remember you mostly for being called Jake Butineau, but in more sort of recent months, you've actually been called Catbaux. So could you explain to me what was the sort of reason why you decided to change your artist name, and what was the sort of inspiration behind that name?
Yeah. Well, it's been something that I've been thinking about for a long time, of coming up with like a pseudonym that's sort of more on brand, because a name is a name and that's fine, but I always want something that was a bit more fun, sort of encapsulates like the type of music and work that I'm doing. And it came down to like a good 2-week brainstorming session of like, okay, I'm finally ready to do it, but like I need to come up with something, because coming up with an original name in 2023 is hard.
Yep.
Everything is taken. Absolutely everything is taken. But I was going through like, okay, what do I like in my life? I like my cats. My cats like their boxes. Catbaux. But I'm like, okay, but I can't just call it Catbaux. And then I'm like, well, I'm one of the few nerds I know that still uses like wired headphones and has like terrible wire cable management in my studio, but like I feel like that entanglement is kind of something special to me, because it's like it's part of the process. It means that you're so into it. And so aux, like an aux cable, AUX. So that's where Catbaux came from. And
now I get it. Now I get the AUX part.
yeah. Everyone thinks it's Catbaux because of my French last name, so they think it's French, but I don't speak any French, so that's not it. But yeah, it's been really fun, and I'm excited to sort of release some more soundtracks and electronic music and stuff under the name.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I suppose we should maybe go now right to the start of your music, though, because that's kind of what I do normally with a lot of the interviews. I go to right back to the beginning. So I suppose my next question I'd like to ask you is, how did you actually get into music in the first place?
Yeah, well, I'm one of the lucky ones who was born into a musical family, which is really nice. Yeah, my mom, Cindy Thompson, she's performed all over Canada as a fiddler. And she was the first person to fiddle and step dance at the same time, which is like a really unique and interesting accolade, because it's like,
all right,
it's great multitasking, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so she got me into it pretty early, and my dad was a guitar player as well. And so I was playing piano at like age 7 or something, and they were really, really amazing. And like, when I got interested in writing music in like my early teenage years, they were like, yeah, go for it. I grew up in a small town, and for some reason our high school had a recording studio. I don't know how that happened. Yeah, like the school had like 600 people, and there was a recording studio. But so I got to do a co-op in that in high school, which was really incredible. And yeah, so I was like producing and writing music from a really young age. And then once I was writing stuff, and I made my first little album with like my high school friends and stuff, and was doing some production, I decided to go to university for music. And I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do with music at that point. I just knew I wanted to do music. And once I was there, I was surrounded by film students who needed scores for their student films. And that seemed way more interesting to me than going to class. So I was a terrible student, and I just spent all of my time like doing student films and hanging out with my other composer friends and stuff like that. I got involved. We made like a student-run orchestra that was performing like video game music and film music and stuff. And so I got really into composing and scoring then. And all the like basically all the production side of it was all self-taught. Getting logic and figuring out how to use it, because my school didn't really teach that. It was like classical performance, jazz performance. So it was figuring it out and getting my friends to help me figure it out too. And then in 2014, a friend introduced me to this weird thing called a game jam, where we go for a weekend and we make a game. And I'm like, that's weird. That's cool. But like the other half of this, I've been doing music all my life. I've been playing video games more my entire life. It was always the thing I was spending my time doing instead of practicing music. So I had like this deep, deep love of video games. And so I went to my first game jam, and I was absolutely, and I made music for a small game with some friends, and I was absolutely hooked to it, that I said, okay, as soon as I graduate in 2015, I am throwing myself into game audio, because it is so incredible and the people are so cool, and I get to make music for video games, which was always sort of something I wanted to do. I just assumed that it wasn't really feasible for whatever reason. Then it turns out Toronto is a hub for video games, and I just sort of stumbled into it. So a lot of luck is what I'm saying. A lot of luck and lucky breaks throughout the process.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, you got a lot of luck on your side there. A bit like my previous interview, only like a couple of hours ago with Brett Sinclair. I mean, luck was on his side as well for his career. But what I'd like to ask you is a little bit about your inspirations, because you, as you mentioned, both of your parents you come from a music family, and so do I as well. And I would sometimes dabble into music. But I don't tend to find that my inspirations are my parents. I tend to find it's outside sources. So is that the same for you, or do you have a sort of, or is it different?
Definitely the music that really inspires me does come from outside sources. Absolutely. Thus is the way of being a rebellious teenager looking for your own music, I guess. No, I like for a long time, actually, when I was quite young, I was really into electronic music, and then I got really into metal for a few years. And then I sort of started discovering these really intimate acts like Sigur Rós and Johan Johansson and Oliver Arnold's, these sort of really quiet sounding soundtracky style things. And then more recently, I got really back into electronic music again, like Carpenter Brut and Deadmau5 and Perturbator. Justice. Lots of really, really heavy stuff. A lot of the things I like are either on the far end of the spectrum of they're really loud and they're really dramatic. But Between the Buried and Me is probably my favorite band, and they're just really intense, technical metal. Or stuff on the other side of the spectrum, which is the most quiet, ambient, intimate stuff that you could imagine. But even though those are my inspirations, I acknowledge that the fact that my family played folk music and I performed with them on stage quite a bit too. Oh. So that sort of folk tradition is absolutely in me. And I hear that when I write stuff that's not folk music, but it's very clearly melody, chords. And it's that is what so much of the folk music we play was, is that a fiddle is playing the melody and I'm on piano playing the chords, and you can sort of map it out that way. Definitely a lot of my music gets boiled down to that. So that inspiration and that history is definitely there.
You mentioned it earlier as well about working on video games under a real short time and the sort of game jam things. Can you describe to me what that was like? Because I remember someone I knew named Lisa, and she did that to sort of train to develop games, and thought that was, I think she thought that was good fun. So what did you think of it?
I love game jams so much, and I try to convince everyone who's interested in game audio or just game dev in general to get into game jams, because it is so hectic but so rewarding, because you have to write something on a very, very small scale, right? And you have to develop something on a really, really small scale, and it sort of puts you under this pressure where you have to sort of run with every first idea that you have and do it really well, which is a really interesting challenge. And the other cool thing about going in as a composer especially is that, let's be honest, a lot of game dev, the audio doesn't actually become like a thing until like the last part of it. Like a lot of the time, it's sort of one of the last things to be integrated, and sometimes to even be created. And so, sometimes I show up for a game jam. If it's 72 hours, I'll take on like 6 or 7 games for a weekend, and it's like make music for all of them. It gets ridiculous, but it's sort of a fun challenge because now you're like, okay, not only do I have to run with my first idea, but now I have to run with a first idea in multiple different genres and be able to like space that all out. It's really cool. But in those cases, I was just going in as just a composer and just sending them audio files, like music loops. But there has been a couple of times where I went in as like I'm doing audio and like all the implementation as well, so making sound effects and hooking it into the game engine and stuff. And I don't think you could do more than one game at a time at that time. But then you get to deal with fun stuff like we got a bunch of bugs 1 hour before the deadline of the game jam. What do we do? It's kind of a real bonding moment for you and the people that you're working with, right? It's like your friendships are being forged in the fires of deadline hell. So
oh boy, I could only imagine that moment, the last hour. Oh god, the game doesn't work! Quick, what do we do?
This is a true story. It has happened, and we managed to fix it in just enough time. But yeah, I've done like dozens of game jams at this point. The main thing is just like they are a lot of energy, right? So it's like you kind of have to budget that because you're basically working for a weekend, and a lot of the games don't get finished. A lot of them don't end up continuing on to become real games, like beyond, I should say real games, full games beyond that like short tiny demo. But the connections that you make through it are incredible, and the people are incredible. So,
what connections did you make from it that you ended up kind of working on future games with?
Yeah. There's been a few people who like I jammed with, and we just got like connected through the jam. It was like they don't have a composer, I'm a composer. They connect us, and then sometimes I've worked on their games. Like they're saying, "Oh, I'm actually a contractor on this other project, and they're looking for a composer, so bring me over there." Unfortunately, that game was never released. So this is the other thing about when working on a lot of indie games. I've worked on a lot of games that just haven't seen the light of day, unfortunately. But there's been other cases too where I'm sitting beside, like in an in-person jam, I'm sitting beside an artist, and we get talking. And then they say, "Wow, this music's great that you're making. I got this person that needs a composer as well." That game also never got released. But this is the way. But and just like I've made a lot of friends through it as well. It's a great time.
Yeah. But one game that actually did get a goddamn release was Super Animal Royale.
Thank you. I'm so glad it did.
Yes. I'm glad too, because oh my god, one of my friends introduced it to me. Her name is Cam, just was like, "Oh, you ever play this game?" I was like, "No." I was like, "Play it." So I played it, and yeah, it's fun. So I want to ask you, how did you end up making the music for Super Animal Royale?
Yeah. It's a big one. When I came on to the team, they were in May of 2018. They were just sort of building like an alpha build to start doing some like internal playtesting. And so they had like temp audio put in, and they were like, "Okay, we need sound effects and music for this." And right now we just need a main menu track, basically, because the game doesn't, like, the gameplay doesn't have music because it's a multiplayer shooter. You want to make sure that the audio information is like not really obscured. And so especially since there's the line of sight system, so like you actually have to use your ears to a degree to be able to know where people are. So they're like, "Okay, we need a main menu track," and we went through a lot of revisions of that thing because it's like, this is the theme of the game, and it's like, I mean, it's the track of the game, right? Like, it's the one with the most listens everywhere. It's the one that everyone knows. But it was interesting because it's like, we want something that's sort of evocative of the games that we were playing when we were kids. So sort of like 90s, early 2000s era. But we want it to be modern. And also, we want the super animals to have a voice. And I'm like, that's interesting. What sort of voice are these genetically modified animals going to have? And so as we were working on it, I sort of went through a bunch of like, I went through this like Pokemon phase of like, I want this game to sound like Pokemon, but then we sort of like pulled that into this like new, this new electronic sort of more shiny sound to it that still has like a little bit of retro synths happening in it. And then when coming up with the super animal voice, I had to figure out, do I want this to be like really synthesized? Do I want this to be like Animal Crossing style? Or do I want it to just be focus on the vocal performance, which is what we ended up going with. So the super animal voice, which can be heard in the theme song, but also all over the game and all over our videos, is Alvin and the Chipmunk style, where we record our voice sort of low and slow, and then you just pitch / speed up the track, and then it turns into this thing, right? Which is fun, especially when you're recording like notes and rhythm for a song, because you have to slow down the whole song and then perform and then speed it back up, which can be incredibly challenging. And some of the voice actors and guest artists we bring on are always like so blown away by they learn how much their lung capacity is, because when you have to sing long notes but then you have to sing it twice as slow, it becomes really challenging. But beyond that sort of main theme, a big part of the in-game world is that Super Animal World is like a theme park. It's like an abandoned theme park, right? And so we wanted to make sure that theme parks have themes. They have music. That's how it works. So we had to come up with that really catchy motif that is the do 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 do, and that is plastered everywhere in the soundtrack, because anything in the soundtrack that would be made by the like Super Animal World in-game lore character would have that theme on it, right? So it's been like a really fun idea of motif, in that I'm constantly reworking that theme, because that's what the in-game corporation would be doing, right? So it's been fun to see how I can rework that theme over and over and over. And I've been working on this game for 5.5 years now. So I've been reworking that theme a lot, and it's been really, really fun.
Yeah, because I was about to ask why the Super Animal theme practically is everywhere in the game, because there's like the main version on the menu, and there's a version in the matchmaking lobby that's when you're there, and then there's a news version, and then there's the musical version, and then there's the demo version, the piano version. It's everywhere, man. It's
and everywhere. That's exactly it. Yeah, that's exactly it. Super Animal World likes their branding, and they want it everywhere.
It's like a slogan in a commercial, except as a jingle.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the audio font. Is that what companies call their little
jingle?
Thing at the? I don't know. Yeah,
I think it's jingle.
Yeah. But this is the funny thing, is that I've never worked in advertising. So this is me looking at this sort of satirical version of a corporation in our game and being like, I wonder how they would act. And I sort of get to poke a bit of fun at it. So I enjoy it.
Absolutely. Another sort of music that you did in the game that you got to sort of poke fun at was popular music, such as the Blue Jay-Z, the Kelly Larkson, my personal favorite, Lady Caw Caw, and I also quite like the Ella Fishgerald one. What was it like sort of coming up with the parodies of all of those sort of artists? And what made you choose those ones as well?
Well, those ones in specific, the bird trio, was because we were doing a bird update where we were adding birds to the game, and we had this massive list of different parody ideas of basically what's funny bird puns that we can make for specifically in this case it was artists from like 2000 to 2010 or whatever, and I went through that list and I'm like, okay, I don't know how to do most of these genres, right? So it's like I need to pick a couple of things that are like maybe a bit challenging, but that I can actually do. And those are the three I landed on. Rapping as a super animal is really challenging. But one track that isn't in game yet, but we made a trailer for about 3 months ago, was the Party Animals for the season 9 party update, and that is like a full-fledged like modern hip-hop track, which I'm really really proud of. First time using autotune. But and then we're just releasing because we've got a new update dropping in a couple of days, and this whole update is like fantasy themed because we're releasing super dragons. So a lot of the time I'm really just at the whim of like, hey, what do we want to do a parody of next? And I'm like, I've never done that genre before. Best of luck to me. Which is really exciting. I mean, even for Ella Fishgerald, like I don't do jazz. I'm not a jazzer, but then I'm presented with, I gotta make jazz. And it's a fun challenge. But the thing that ties it together is always that there are super animals performing it, right? And so I get to sort of put that in. But yeah, Blue Jay-Z and Ella Fitzgerald are both me. Lady Caw Caw and Kelly Larkson is my partner Sarah, who I get to come in here and sing into the microphone sometimes. It's a real collaborative effort. Yeah.
Can you please describe to me what it is like rapping as a super animal? Because oh boy, like you hear it and like I didn't necessarily get the joke because I don't listen to a lot of Jay-Z music, but when I heard that it was a super animal rapping, I was like, oh my god, this is so funny.
It's wild. It's wild. That track specifically, I actually live streamed myself recording that one. I think it's an unlisted video somewhere now, but it's like, really, I take the track, I slow it down. At that time, we were improvising the lyrics. Now we write all the lyrics out beforehand because we're trying to make Animalish a like coherent language that's consistent with itself. But back then it was like I pulled up some Jay-Z lyrics and I'm trying to gibberish them as I'm going. So I'm like, wabadi wabble, dabi bladi wabble. And then I have to take that, I have to speed it up, make sure that it sounds good, because one weird thing about performing slow is that you have to elongate your consonants, which is not something you ever have to do. So it's a lot of trial and error of like trying to figure out, does this sound good? Does that sound weird? And sometimes you get excited and you try to do some like faster rhythms or triplets or whatever. And you speed it up, and then the animal's like, blah, blah, blah. It's just like, that's too fast. No, even a genetically modified super animal couldn't go that fast. Yeah, it's a really fun process, but very challenging in a lot of weird ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And even coming up with like the sort of gibberish sounding language, like, because I was listening to the music, but they had also had English lyrics, and if you really listen faintly, really faintly, you can hear the English, but if you're not searching for that English,
which I think is what's so fun about it, because personally, I am not that into lyrics, and I never really have been. I've always been like an instrumental person, and if I listen to music, I'm not listening to the lyrics. But Sigur Rós, I don't know how much they do it now, but they used to have like this made-up language called Hopelandish or Hopelandic, I think, and it was completely like just mouth sounds, right? It was just vowels and vocables and stuff like that. And I was really inspired by that because you can focus so much on the character of the voice without paying attention to the meaning behind the words. It's how the words sound. And so with Animalish, it's fun because even if we have a translation now, when we're making our Animalish version, we can basically turn it into like the sounds of the syllables. We can make it whatever we want it to be. So we can make it sound really beautiful, or we can make it sound really silly and like poppy or whatever. And we aren't constrained by the rules of language so much there, which is kind of a fun thing for me since I don't really care too much about lyrics. Thankfully, the writer of the game and the video producer, Ruben, is a great lyricist. So I leave most of the actual meaningful lyrics to him, and I just write dumb stuff.
Oh my goodness. But you have written some maybe not so dumb stuff, such as Pete's Song, another kind of favorite of the game. How did Pete's Song sort of come together? Because, I mean, I don't even think you even knew how to play guitar at the time.
Oh no, I didn't, and I still barely do. That was purely digital samples on the old keyboard here. Yeah, that was a funny one because in game at that point we had a location called Pete's Swamp, but the character Pete hadn't really been introduced yet. But I was toying around with ideas as I was putting together the soundtrack, because the original soundtrack that came out when the game released in early access didn't really have that much on it, right? It was like the main theme, it was the lobby, the fountain music, the flying music, and then like some emote music, like the default dance and and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I want to fill out the soundtrack because, yeah, you know it. Because I'm like, I really want to fill out the soundtrack because we have such a good starting place, and I want to fill out the world a bit. And so I ended up doing a remix of the default dance, which I called Default, which is on the original soundtrack, which is kind of like Jazz Jackrabbit inspired, funny enough, old Epic Games throwback there. But then I was just sort of playing around these ideas, and honestly, like Pete's Song, I hate to it's such a boring like origin story, but I was just playing around on the piano with my classic folk idea of melody and chords, and I came up with this little, like, you know, it's got sort of that like augmented fifth thing going on, and I was just like, ooh, that's fun. And then I just sort of made this little tune, and then I got my my good friend Lex Metcalf, who did some sound design on the game very early on as well. I got her to hum it because I wasn't a good enough vocalist at the time to hum consistently when slowed down. I think that my singing skills have improved a lot while working on this game because you have to sing everything slowly. But yeah, it's funny because that track sort of took off, and it set a tone for who Pete would be in the future and Pete's Swamp in general. And this is part of why I really like working with developers from like a really early stage in their development, is that I get to throw my creative ideas into the mix, right? Because I made Pete's Song before Pete was fully fleshed out as a character, and now as a result, they have this theme. And now their character has been introduced more. They have a location in game. They've been seen in videos and stuff. You know, I got to be part of that creative process and that collaboration. And that's what's really cool about working on a game for this long.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Especially if you could put your own little input and add your own little ideas to it. Because I know in the older Halo games, the composer, Marty O'Donnell, he would even suggest ideas, and some of them even got into the game. So it kind of reminds me of that with yourself with this game.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really small team. There's only like 15 people working on the game right now. And
whoa, that's quite small.
It's really small. Yeah, there's like 6 full-time, and then the rest are contractors. It's a really small team. And so basically, you know, every day when we're working on Discord, everyone's putting in their ideas, right? Like it's a really lovely little collaboration. We don't sort of section off certain topics of conversation. Obviously, some people are much better at certain things than other people. I'm not a game designer, but I understand how sound design can affect gameplay, right? It can affect player information, and so I get to throw in my ideas about that when it comes to game design. It's like, hey, how is sound going to affect how players play here, right? So yeah, it's nice to be on a small team for that reason. Everyone really has an impact.
Yeah, exactly. And if you go like to the sound design as well, you did seem to have a good bit of involvement in that. What sort of sounds, other than the Super Animal sounds, did you maybe make, or was there any you maybe outsourced somewhere? Or, you know, how did you sort of implement the whole sound? Because when you hear it in the game, it's unique. You know what it is. You know what a super animal sounds like. You know what a gun in the game sounds like. You know what the little menu sounds like. It's quickly recognizable.
Yeah. So I'm gonna say about 98% of the sound in the game is made by me.
Oh.
Yeah. So yeah, my friend Lex Metcalf helped with the at the very beginning, just because we had a lot of stuff to do in a short amount of time. So she made like the weird gas sound, like when you're in the poison or the skunk gas. And there's sort of the weird like and like the gong of the gas coming. So she did some of that stuff. But yeah, like most of the sound is me. And that was a really fun challenge because I hadn't worked on anything like multiplayer sound design wise up to that point. But I had this idea of like, I don't want this game to, it doesn't have to have like realistic sounding audio, right? You don't need like a million variations of every gunshot or anything. I do really value this idea that everything has a really clear signature. And I'm glad that you mentioned that because that means I'm doing my work correctly. But like, because when you're playing this game, you want to get as much information as you can while playing. And so every gun sound is really important so that you know what guns enemies are using, because if they're using a shotgun versus an AK versus a BCG or whatever, right? The big clucking
SMG.
gun. No, the BCG, the big
Oh,
clucking gun.
Nice.
The big clucking gun. It's a chicken in a tube that shoots eggs.
Oh, amazing! I haven't went to the more peculiar guns yet. I've kind of stuck to the guns that look like guns.
Yeah, no, we've got some weird guns in this game, which I love. But like they all have very different effects, and they're all very different to play against, even if they're regular guns, right? Shotgun versus sniper is a huge difference. So I'm like, I got to make sure that every gun sounds really unique, which is kind of challenging when you're like, okay, in real life, like all these realistic guns don't actually sound that different, but this is a video game, so you got to give everything a really unique signature. And whether that's the AK has like a really pronounced like metal like ringing sound to it, while as the M16 is much more of like a ka-chunk, right? Just making sure that every gun has that. And as we add more guns, because I think now we have 14 or 15, I can't remember, but as we add more, it just becomes more difficult, right? Because it's like, I got to make sure this sound has something unique that no other guns have, or else you lose that information for players.
Yeah, exactly. And when it comes to sort of the guns in general, I'm sure the laser guns and whatnot are made on a keyboard or whatnot, but when it comes to the sort of guns that are in real life, have you sort of like found those guns and then recorded them and shot them and see what happens?
Yeah, no. So I'm while I do a lot of sound design, I definitely do not go as deep into it as some really incredible accomplished sound designers do, but I try to so the gun sounds are all library sounds, but
all right.
The sound design trick is that you layer things like crazy. So even like, I think the pistol sound has 8 different layers in it.
Ooh.
Yeah. And some of those layers are very pronounced. Some of them are just like a muffle that like is like the sound of it hitting your chest when you fire, or like a little bit of sometimes like in the sniper sound, there's a little recorded sound of my mouth going, right? Like you have to get really creative in that way, because it's not just a matter of, oh, they'll hear this sound from a sound library and then they'll recognize it and they'll know it's from here. No, it's because a library is never going to give you exactly what you need and what you want. And so a lot of time it's like, oh, I feel like this new gun needs a little bit more of this crackly oomph sound. I guess I'll grab like a firecracker and like, or like a firework sizzle and like work that in. So it's like, it's stuff that isn't a real gun sound. And that's how they have those unique sound signatures, because real guns all sound the same. So if you went out and recorded them, unless I guess you're recording all the like sort of Foley sounds of like moving around the mechanics and stuff, they all sound the same. So you have to spruce them up with special effects like that.
Yeah, well, that makes sense now because I was wondering how that sort of came about, and yeah, worked pretty well. So that's a good thing. Was there any sort of other tunes that you did in Super Animal Royale that you have a particular fondness of that may not be the Super Animal theme or something we've maybe already mentioned?
Yeah. It's funny because the nature of this sort of constant update schedule that we've been doing, because it's like a live service multiplayer game, is that a lot of the greatest work that we do actually hasn't made it into the game yet. It was like trailer music, right? I mean, Pete's song didn't make it into the game for like 3 years or something. But one of my favorite tracks that I've made was the Rebel March.
Ooh, yeah, that one.
Yeah, which first came around as part of our Super Animal Royale Tonight series, which is like a combination of trailer, community clip highlights, and storytelling, because that's where we like show a lot of the lore of the game. But the game has like and the in-game world, because the game has a lot of environmental storytelling. We haven't even gotten into that yet. But like there's a rebellion trying to fight against Super Animal World for liberation of all of the super animals, so that they're not all fighting to the death over and over and over. And so we knew that this faction was going to have a theme for a long time, but I had to like really figure it out. And eventually I came to this idea of like, and I'm talking with Ruben, what if it was like a workers song, right? Like what if it had sort of like these like labor union vibes to it? Going back to the folk roots, right?
Yep.
It's like, because Super Animal World is all electronics and orchestra, it's like, what if this felt like a small ensemble of animals, just finding whatever instruments they could find? And so I wrote it with that in mind. But what was really cool about it was then I actually asked like some of our core community members, because this game could not exist without the amazing community that we have. I sent them a message and I said, does anyone want to record their voice for this? And so I gave them instructions on how to record. And as a result, there are 16 different community members' voices in that song. So it was sort of a way for me to get a variety of voices, but also for them to sort of get to contribute to this game that they love. So it was a really, really fun project as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose now it's almost been 5 years plus now that you've been involved in the Super Animal Royale game. So I suppose the question I'll end it off with, and then we'll move on to maybe some other games that you've done, is what does it feel like to be a part of such a game that's gotten so popular and actually came out?
Yeah, well, that's the best part.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of wild and very humbling in a lot of ways, right? Like it's not like I've gotten recognized on the street or whatever, right? Like it's not that popular.
Yeah.
But it's just such a pleasure for people to enjoy a game that I feel like creatively and emotionally invested in, right? Because it's like I'm putting my heart into a lot of this music and people are enjoying it. And I do think that the game is really fun and really good and people are enjoying it. I'm glad that they are, especially in a genre that I was a little concerned about when it first came out. I was like, oh boy, we're releasing a battle royale in 2018. This might be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
But the Pixile team is absolutely incredible, and I'm not surprised that we pulled it off. But yeah, it's really heartwarming to see that it's still going 5 years in, right?
Yes, and that it released in the first place.
It went to early access and then we released onto consoles and stuff. Even like we made it past 2 gates.
Exactly. I'm getting Xbox achievements in this game now, so like that's.
I used to be so into PlayStation trophies. Now I can get trophies of my own game. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my god. But you have done some other games as well. You did one that was called Dune Sea. Now, I haven't played it, but I saw a little bit of the trailer, and I might actually give it a little go, because it looks very relaxing. And you did a very relaxing sort of soundtrack to it. So, what was it like working on the soundtrack to Dune Sea?
Yeah, it was really cool because it's very much like this sort of like, yeah, slow instrumental meditative soundtrack. Um, we actually, one interesting little design challenge we ran into is because it's very relaxing as a game, but like, it can actually be quite challenging at times. And so we have this like really constant, like, sort of gameplay loop of crashing and respawning. And so I was just like, it doesn't make sense for the game, for the music to continue through this as just like a continuous loop, but I don't want people to start at the beginning of the music over and over. So I actually ended up writing the music in a way where it has multiple start points for every track. So as you play, it's sort of like and you respawn, it sort of starts in different points in the track. And that definitely that sort of informed the way that I composed and structured the music, because it's like I kind of want these tracks to be memorable in their own right, but to be able to sort of start in multiple places. So it's kind of like writing multiple tracks in one suite of music, which was really exciting. But that was a game that took a while to develop. A lot of indie games do take longer than you expect them to. And so it was one of those ones where at the beginning, like the first levels, and we designed the game in a linear fashion. The first levels, I think I made the music for those in like 2017, and then by the end, I was making those in like 2019, right? So I had these 2 years of difference, and in that time, it's like I could hear myself improving as well. So I'm like, oh, yeah. I gotta go back to those first tracks and like spruce them up as well, right? But it felt like I was writing music that I used to write for student films back when I was at school, sort of that slow, intimate instrumental style. So it was nice to be able to revisit that, because I love that style of music. And I've had some like friends like use it for like their meditation classes and stuff, right? So it's kind of a nice heartwarming thing as well.
Yeah, yeah. Probably another thing that would have been used for their sort of meditation sort of playlist. Because I know when I was playing it a few days ago, I went, "Oh my God, this is really good!" And that is your little album called EXO. I want to speak a little bit about that, because I was listening to it, going, "Oh, let's see what this is like." I was like, "Whoa, this is actually quite good." So, what was it like putting that album together?
Yeah, so that whole album was actually live stream improvised, that entire album, not in one go. The album is a collection and compilation of a bunch of live streams I did back in 2020 when I had entirely too much time stuck in the studio by myself. But so that was just like basically what you see here, right? Of my keyboard and my synth, and I have a little drum machine here as well. And I was like, I want to make some like really synthy ambient music. And so I set myself up, and I was recording like loops into Ableton and stuff. But a lot of the time it was just like one hand on the keyboard, one hand on the synth, and sort of like playing around like that. And I am like a really big space nerd. I love cosmology. I love, learning about all these physics things that are way over my head, but I just find like so intriguing. So it was a way for me to sort of like explore like some of these sonic ideas of like these far, like, not even sci-fi. It's like these are things in our real universe, but are just sort of beyond our grasp, right? So sort of creating this after doing all these live streams that are inspired by this vague idea of traveling into space. Then I sort of compiled it into this story of we detect an exoplanet around another star that has signs of life, and then we travel there. And the whole album is sort of a sonic retelling of, or a sonic telling of that story. Retelling if it actually happened. Maybe, hopefully, one day it does. But yeah, that's a big part of like when I'm writing like personal albums, which unfortunately I don't have too much time to do now with all the work I'm doing on Animal Royale. But with EXO, and then previous to that, in 2017, I released a small EP called Rook, and before that, I released a small album called Polygun. They're all instrumental, but they're all telling a story. That's like a big part of album structure that I really, really value is you listen to the whole album and there is a very clear thorough line of what's happening. Obviously to the listener that's going to be very different because there's not words telling them what the story is. But hopefully my vision is like something that can be felt, right? Of you're going on this journey. So yeah, but doing that improvisation was very, very fun because I hadn't done improvisation for a long time, and doing it in sort of this very slow, spacey way made it very re-accessible for me to get back into because you don't have to worry about quick performance or anything, right? You focus really on texture and tone, and mood. So it was really fun.
Is the reason why you like doing concept albums the same reason why you do soundtracks for video games and films?
I think so. Yeah. I really like when music is connected to a very definite idea, right? I don't tend to just make like music for music's sake, like beats or just like little tracks or anything. I always like when it's attached to something. And so in the case of when I'm making my own music, I don't have something attached to it. So I kind of have to attach it to something myself. One fun tidbit about Rook was that the entire thing is actually scored to scenes from Drive, 2011 movie with Ryan Gosling.
Huh.
I just took some scenes from that and I plugged them into Ableton and I spotted them and then I used that as a template to make my album. But this is it, right? Because I'm a very like reactive creative. I like seeing something and then making something as a response. And that works really well when you're working with video games and with clients because almost always you're at least hearing their ideas of, hey, we're thinking about making this. I can take that and then come up with ideas as a result. But yeah, even personal creation, it's all reactive. I love making things in response to an idea or an art or something.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do you even improvise music as well? Because that sounds like a bit of a challenge where it's like, right, I'm going to have to come up with the whole melody on the spot. Here we go.
Yeah, I think this goes back again to my history of folk music because one interesting thing about being a piano player for fiddlers is that when you're in like a big jam session that's going on for hours at a time, people don't like tell you what tunes they're going to play and they don't tell you what the chord progression is. They might tell you what key it's in. A lot of the time they don't even do that. But you just have to figure it out on the fly. So like so often I'd be playing and I'm playing and then a fiddler jumps into a tune that I don't know. And you just have to figure it out on the spot. And the way you do that is all of your past experience, right? It's like you're hearing the collection of notes and you're figuring out, I've heard these before, what chords are going to fit into that. Improvisation is very similar, except instead of, in this case, it isn't very reactionary, right? It's like you're using your own internal experience of, I know what notes work well together, and I can predict what this note or chord or texture is going to sound in comparison to the one I'm doing right now. And obviously it happens very quickly and you get into a flow state. But a lot of it is just like you just sort of predict what's going to sound good, but because of all your past experience, it usually does. And if you do make something that sounds bad, you just have to roll with it, right? It's like you play the wrong note wrong once, it sounds bad, but if you just play it over and over after that, then it sounds intentional, right? It's like you just sort of have to figure it out. But it's fun. Improvising is fun because yeah, you sort of have to let go of a lot of your ego and just like, I'm going to make something and it might suck, but it might be really good too. So
Yeah, I see. So it sounds interesting. I haven't tried improvising enough in music. In acting maybe, but not in music. It sounds like a whole different ball game. But maybe I should give it a go after hearing that. And after hearing that album.
Absolutely.
I don't know. Let's give it a go at least. And if it sucks, it sucks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. As long as it's only a problem if you're live streaming it to people and then they hear it sucks, right? If you're just in the comfort of your own home, then only you know it sucks, which is maybe better.
Oh my goodness gracious. Another soundtrack he also did as well for a video game is a game called Destiny's Sword. Now, I haven't played this one either, but I have heard the music for it. Very good stuff, and I see that it's a very kind of RPG-like game. So what was it like sort of making the soundtrack for that?
Yeah, so that was fun because it was very much like this is a sci-fi game, right? Like we want this sort of orchestral electronic like combination, which I hadn't really worked on that much up to that point. But it's cool because approaching that game, the story building in that game as well is like really, really deep. There's all sorts of different factions and characters and sort of the characters' emotions as a gameplay mechanic is like quite a big thing. Because it's a game that's like sort of informed by mental health and like dealing with people in that way. And so going into it is like, okay, so we want it to be this really exciting orchestral big music, but it has this entire layer of intimacy in the way that we have to be able to displace all sorts of emotions through music, whether it's joy or grief or disgust or surprise, like all of these sort of complicated things that you don't do too much in music. And a lot of what we did through that, because the preview album of the music that we have up, because the game is still in development, it's in early access on Steam right now. It doesn't really encompass the whole breadth of the game because that game was sort of my big dive into dynamic and adaptive music. Actually, the soundtrack is like goes very deep into that because we have an entire dialogue system where the music that's being played for any given conversation is directly connected to what those characters' emotional statistics are at any given time. So it's sort of these interesting combinations of like you have to combine happy and sad. You have to combine anxious and even joy, right? And so it was very introspective in a lot of ways, right? It's because it's like what do all these emotions sound like, right? Like what does vigilance as a like sound like for music? What an interesting idea. So it was like that combined with, oh, we also want a lot of really exciting action stuff. So I got to really dive into my orchestral chops, and then combine that with all this fun synth work that I've been doing. So it's a big breadth of music all crammed into one game.
Yeah. I'm guessing it's a bit of a challenge to do, especially since it's still in early access and the game isn't fully finished yet. It's a real challenge to get all this music sort of working in the game.
Yeah. But the great thing about it is that like we in that case, like I have like a pretty close hand in like the implementation. So we're using Fmod as a middleware, and so I've got my Fmod Studio project, and I can go in and I can really dig in and be like, what are all the triggers for the music? How are all the different layers being affected? How are they all interacting with each other? And then I can go ahead and play test the game as many times as I need to make sure that it's all working correctly, right? And that's really important when you're doing the dynamic sound design, right? Is because like, or dynamic music design is very different than just like you create the music and then you give it to an audio team who then does all of that for you. In this case, I get to compose it with the knowledge of it's going to be dynamic, and I get to decide how those two things interact. And that's one of my favorite parts about game music. It's very cool.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine it being a lot of fun just going and implementing the music yourself and then seeing it all come together and it's like, oh, look at this, I did this.
Yeah. And especially when it's like sort of when you've got emergent things of like, oh, this music is only going to play if you have a character above this threshold of like their anger stat, and also like this other character is doing this. So like the chance of it happening is like quite low, but then you're playing it and then it happens and it fits the moment so well, and you're like, okay, that is like supposed to fit. But it's challenging in that case, because it's like, what if the wrong music plays during like the wrong moment, right? Like what if one of your characters is really happy, but then like there's this really like somber, like horrible thing happening in the game, and then it's just like the happy character's just like, hey everyone, how's it going? Right? It's like you have to be really careful about those tonal dissonances, right? It's a real challenge, but it's been a fun project, definitely.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. Well, hopefully it gets finished like Super Animal Royale. I mean,
yeah. To be clear, Super Animal Royale is still in development. It's just that we're releasing updates, right?
yeah, but that game is kind of like a live service at that point. So you know, like it came out at least. But I mean, this game is in early access, so like I mean, it's kind of came out somewhat. It's nearly out.
I love that the thorough line of this interview is just like, wait, have any of the games I've even worked on ever actually come out? Am I a curse on all the developers that I work with?
No, don't worry. I've worked on indie games before, even ones of my own, and some of them come out and some of them never do. But that's how it rolls.
Game dev is very difficult, everyone. It's very satisfying when it happens, but it's very difficult.
Yes, and those bugs. Oh, those bugs.
You can never expect them, right? You can never expect how deep they will go.
Yes, it's the computer engineer's equivalent of war flashbacks. Whenever something goes wrong.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, it's not fun. But what is sometimes fun is making YouTube videos, and that's what you have done yourself with YouTube essays and YouTube interviews. You even interviewed someone that I interviewed. Thanks for that interview, by the way. It helped for research.
Oh, you're welcome.
The one with Jamie Christopherson, it really helped for research. So
oh yeah,
thank you
fantastic.
for that one.
Oh,
Oh,
he's
brilliant,
really
man. Brilliant, man. But what's it like doing all those sort of videos where you interview people who worked on the games and then you're complaining about sleigh bells one moment?
yeah. That was a fun project, making content for a few years, because a lot of it was like, I have all of these ideas and thoughts and opinions as someone who is doing this, right? And it's like, I feel like a lot of the time, content is sort of either extremely technical, or it's not like even scratching the surface of like a topic. And I really wanted to find that sort of middle ground of, I want things to be accessible for non-audio people, but I want to go deep into audio topics. And so finding a language that works was really, really what I was aiming for. And it was challenging, but yeah, for like a couple of years, I basically was like, what's every like opinion that I could possibly have about game audio, and sleigh bells were one of those. And I was able to sort of, put those thoughts down, because up to that point, like my whole life, I've been accumulating all these ideas of like, what do I care about, like creatively and technically. And what do I think is important, not just for me, but maybe for the industry as a whole, and as for the medium as an art form. And then being able to put those ideas down in a way that's fun, because video creation is fun. I do enjoy doing it. But yeah, and then the interviews were very much like, I just wanted to learn more about this world that I was getting pretty deep into at that point, because around that time I had started working on Animal Royale and Destiny Sword. I was already several years into my career. I'm sitting there like, how do these great people do it, right? Like there must be some wisdom there. Of course, there's an unlimited amount of stories and experiences that they can share, which is really exciting. But yeah, the whole content creation was like when I was sort of just, getting my career going and I didn't have, or I had free time and I had all these thoughts. It's like I got to put them somewhere. And it's been really good because I was able to build a little bit of an audience and a following that I actually brought into Animal Royale with me when we
brilliant.
first started doing when we first started doing play tests and stuff. I think most of the playtesters were from my channel, right? So it was kind of this like fun way of giving to these developers that I'm working with is be like, oh, I already have a little bit of an audience. Let's get them involved, right? So yeah, it was a fun thing. But I have so many video ideas of like things like I still want to make a video about desert level music because that stuff really grinds my gears sometimes. The cliches, oh my goodness, listen, cliches have a time and a place and a purpose, but sometimes they just
yeah,
they make me mad. Yeah, I have ideas for videos, but it's just a matter of time and energy. There's not enough time in a day. There's not enough time in a life to do everything that we want to do sometimes, right? So it's like I'm just putting those on the back burner for now. But it was a good time. It was a good time complaining about sleigh bells.
Yes, well, I will look forwards for you complaining about desert level music next time. That is something. What is it actually? Is it the sort of like Egyptian sounds or the sort of like fakey? Oh, this is what music in Egypt sounds like. What's the thing that grinds your gears?
It's yes, that's part of it. It's that they. Like everyone likes using this scale with that sort of starts with that minor second that isn't actually like a real like Arabic scale or like or anything, right? Like there's so much incredible music, traditional and modern, to come out of Egypt especially, that we could be like drawing on. But instead we use that. And also there are a lot of different deserts in the world. Why don't we use other world cultures as why not American deserts? Why not Australian deserts? There's a desert in Canada. Like there's so many deserts that you could pick from. It's just it's one of those, it's like, I think that video games love referencing the things that inspired us. I mean, Animal Royale does it to a degree too, right? But like when you're making beach level music and you use steel drums, like, do you have to? There are other beaches out there in the world. You could get other ideas for beaches. It's one of these funny little things of we love referencing things that we've heard in the past and that have inspired us. But the medium's been around for long enough, everyone. Maybe we can move on.
I know. It's a bit like with Irish music. When you hear like someone trying to make like an Irish song, immediately it's always the and I'm like, oh, for God's sake. Like it exists, that music, and it is Irish music, but there's acts like U2 that exist that don't sound diddly daddly.
Yeah. Although I do have to say I'm sorry because so much fiddle music is diddly daddly. If I ever make Irish music, it's gonna sound like that, Jack. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No bother.
I'm gonna be jigging it up so hard.
Oh no, don't worry. I won't be cringing too hard. I won't be cringing too hard because I'm used to it. But it is funny that when you do hear, oh yeah, someone thinks Irish music immediately. Now, we're coming close down to the end of the interview, so I would just like to ask you just a few more last questions. And I suppose the first one I'll ask is, what's the sort of future of your music kind of unfolding? What's your plans for the future, I suppose? Yeah.
Well, it's funny because the development for Super Animal Royale is going to be going on indefinitely, right?
Yep.
Like we don't have an end in sight. So next year, I want to release Volume 4 of the soundtrack, which is going to have a lot of music because the last time we released a volume for the game was at the beginning of 2022. So we have almost 2 years of music banked up. So people can look forward to all the Super Animal Royale music coming in the future. But I'm really excited to do some more personal music now that basically Animal Royale is the only game I'm really focused on. I have all these other personal ideas that are sort of brewing and stuff. I've haven't made like metal music in a long time. And I want to like combine all of this like heavy electronic synth work with metal one day in a way that I think would be really exciting. I've been learning bass and like slap bass like recently, so I want to like start incorporating that into my music. But definitely it's like there's a hole in my life of writing personal projects, right? And so I'm definitely hoping to fill those in. And now that I have this Catbox branding, I think it's going to be really fun and maybe a little bit silly. Not that I would ever get silly or anything. I never do that for Animal Royale. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to making some more music in the coming year.
Yeah, absolutely. And another sort of one I was wondering is since the music for Super Animal Royale is done so well and everything and all that, I was wondering, will there be ever a chance that soundtrack or maybe some of your other music gets a physical release, so we get like a big CD or a vinyl? Oh, look at that, I got the Super Animal Royale soundtrack, everybody. Hey.
Yeah, people have been really hounding me for it lately. And it sounds fun, and I think I'd love to do it, but it's so funny because it's like, well, the game has 3 volumes of music already, so like, do we release each of those as a vinyl? And then what happens when the next volume of music gets released? Do we release that as a vinyl? Like, it quickly is going to become like that meme of like trying to hold everything, but it's all Super Animal Royale vinyls like falling out of your arms. Why can't I hold all these vinyls? Yeah, I think it would be fun, but I've never released any physical soundtracks before, so it'll be another learning experience for me, right? But I think it'd be fun. One thing I really want to do eventually is actually somehow perform some of the music live.
Oh, that would be brilliant.
Right? Like, I don't know how I would even do it beyond just like bringing a laptop and pressing play. But like, I would love to figure that out and to also find a venue in which it would actually be feasible. Like whether we went to like MagFest or something and did it.
Yeah, I was going to say MagFest, go to MagFest. Or maybe even get like, like you were saying, you had originally like, years ago now, you were in like little bands that did video game music.
Yeah,
so like you could go and form a new one or whatnot, or get some of those old guys in, perform the music at something like MagFest, and hey, presto, there you go. Super Animal Royale live.
I would absolutely love to do it. But this is the challenge of working on a live service game, is that like, even like whenever we release an update, it's just like, all right, cool. Congratulations, everyone. Now we need to immediately get to work on the next update, right? It's like finding a break is tough. But I think these are some things that would be fun to do at some point in the future, but don't quote me on any sort of timeline. Okay.
Oh, yes. I'm glad that you didn't mention any sort of timeline, because I remember one of my earliest interviews, there was this guy who told me, I may have an album out in late 2021. And I was like, oh, great, you're going to have an album in late 2021. No, Jack. I might have an album out in 2021. It's nearly 2024. He still hasn't had that album yet. Omar, get to work in it, for God's sake.
Yeah, we have to be so careful about getting people's hopes up.
Oh my God. Well, look, with that, Catbox, thank you so much for coming on. It was great chatting to you. Is there any sort of last things you'd like to say? And would you like to plug in your own socials?
Yeah. I just want to thank you for the great interview. Thank you to Pixel Studios for all you do for Animal Royale. In terms of where you can find me at Catbox, CATBAUX. Most places. The rebrand is still in process, so you might find me at Jake Butineau some places, BUTINEAU. But hopefully we get everything moved over soon. Go listen to Spotify, YouTube. You can watch some of those old videos, including the one where I complain about sleigh bells if you want. Yeah, you can find me all over the internet.
Yes, brilliant. And you can find me simply on my YouTube channel, Jack Lucas Caffrey. I'm also available on Instagram and Facebook, where next year I'll be hosting a bunch of highlights that I did for all the previous interviews that I have done, including this one with Catbaux. So with that, thank you very much for coming on. And yes, we finished an interview. We actually did it.
Woo, we did it.